Charles Chaplin, without modesty, considered Monsieur Verdoux the cleverest and most brilliant film of my career. It is certainly the blackest of his comedies, the story of a serial killer who ends up beheaded on the guillotine. But, as he had always said, comedy is never very far from tragedy and horror. Under the proper circumstances, he wrote, murder can be comic. The idea was originally suggested by Orson Welles as a project for a dramatised documentary on the career of the legendary French wife-killer Henri-Désiré Landru, who was executed in 1922, having murdered at least 10 wives, 2 dogs, and 1 boy. Chaplin paid Welles $5,000 for the idea, with the agreement that the film would carry the credit based on an idea by Orson Welles. In later years, Welles claimed that he himself had written a script for the film, but this is unlikely. Certainly the written agreement between Chaplin and Welles makes no mention of it. The agreement was signed in 1941, but Chaplin took 4 more years to complete the script. In the meantime, the irritating distractions of a much publicised and ugly paternity suit had been compensated by his brilliantly successful marriage to Una O'Neill. Monsieur Henri Verdoux has much in common with his real-life original, Monsieur Henri Landru. Both are furniture dealers by profession, and both maintain a respectable bourgeois family life whilst marrying and murdering rich widows for their money. Like Landru also, Verdoux is finally caught when the family of one of his victims grows curious about her disappearance. Chaplin uses the story to make a satirical comparison between private and public murder. Verdoux declares, "As for being a mass murderer, does not the world encourage it? Is it not building weapons of destruction for the sole purpose of mass killing? One murder makes a villain, millions a hero. Numbers sanctify." Sentiments like these were deeply suspect in 1940s America, which had already begun to slide into the paranoia and witch-hunting of the Cold War years. The Breen Office, the American cinema's self-censorship system, initially disapproved the script in its entirety, claiming that it impugns the present-day social structure, even though the story was set in France between the 2 world wars. In the end, they were satisfied with only a few cuts, though the prudery of those times demanded the removal of all scenes that suggested that a husband and wife might share the same bed, or that a girl could be a prostitute. Apart from censorship problems, the shooting was faster and more trouble-free than any full-length film Chaplin had ever made. The soaring costs of production and the post-war rationing of film stock meant that Chaplin could no longer afford the luxury of improvisation and on-set experiment that previously characterized his working method. Economy now dictated that everything must be carefully planned in advance. So for the first time, Chaplin worked with a completely finished script, a precise shooting schedule, and meticulous planned drawings for every scene. To ensure authenticity in the French settings, he engaged as his assistant Robert Fleuret, the French director and an old friend and admirer. Monsieur Verdoux's moustache was also authentic. For the first time, Chaplin grew a real moustache for a screen role. The shooting was completed in less than 3 months. Monsieur Verdoux was released in New York in April 1947, at a time when the political paranoia was climbing to its first peak, with Chaplin, vaguely suspected of radical sympathies, as one of its most prominent victims. He was shocked by the generally unenthusiastic response to the premiere, but much more by a press conference at which hostile journalists declined to discuss the film, but insisted on asking him questions about his political sympathies, patriotism, tax affairs, and refusal to adopt American citizenship. Subsequently, the same right-wing zealots responsible for this harassment organized hostile pickets at cinemas showing the film, even forcing United Artists temporarily to withdraw it from circulation. This was the start of Chaplin's last and unhappiest period in the United States, which he was definitively to leave in 1952. But among all the hostility, there were still passionate supporters of Chaplin and Monsieur Verdoux. The most important of them all was the legendary critic James Agee of The Nation, who struck back at the reactionary opposition. He declared, "I believe that a democracy which cannot contain all its enemies of whatever kind or virulence is finished as a democracy." Chaplin was not, of course, America's enemy, but in the character of Monsieur Verdoux he was undoubtedly a critic, in a society in which criticism was deeply unwelcome.